Okay, we're good to go.
All right, thank you so much. Good evening, everyone. It is Tuesday, March 1st, 2022. And I now call to order the City Council workshop. It is 5:30 p.m. Lisa, will you please take roll call and verify quorum?
Yes. Councilmember Jessup?
Present.
Councilmember Cleveland?
Present.
Councilmember Peterson?
Present.
Councilmember Williams?
Present.
Councilmember Sherman? Uh-oh, I see her. Can I hear her?
Nope, but let's mark her as here.
She does need to be able to participate. Councilmember Boyle?
Present.
Okay.
I'm happy to not participate, but my mouse was on a different monitor that I can't see.
Okay, we're good now. Also with us, of course, is Mayor Hernandez, City Administrator Rizzatello, Finance Director Brian Carlton, our engineering consultant, Alex Fazzari from JUB, Human Resources Manager, Sean Doring, Deputy Clerk, Sherry St. Clair, and myself, City Clerk Lisa Neisel. We do have a quorum. Good to go.
Great, thank you. Will you all please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Oh, my mistake, not good to go. You're going to have to say it.
All right, join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to your flag of the United States of America and to the republic
for which it stands,
one
one
nation,
nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty
and
and
justice.
justice
for all.
Good practice.
It's good for me. All right, so let's move on to workshop topics. And Mr. Fazzari, welcome. Thank you for rushing over.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, so then we're going to discuss the wastewater treatment plant update, and you are up.
Okay, thank you very much. So next slide, please. So here's just a quick overview of what I'll be presenting to you today, and feel free to interrupt at any time with questions or concerns, but basically just going to give you an update of the funding situation for the wastewater treatment plant upgrade project, and then discuss a potential regional solution that's come up over the last month or so. Next slide, please. So in terms of the ecology funding update, the wastewater treatment plant phase 1 project. So as you recall, we did a facility plan and we identified 3 different phases of improvements. The first one being the phase that's most required by ecology in terms of the compliance schedule in your permit. Those plans for the phase 1 project have been reviewed and approved by the ecology, and the project is ready to bid. We did apply for funding for this project in October of last year, and Ecology released their draft funding offer list in January, and the project ranked #1 on their list for funding in terms of need and putting together a really good application. So the city staff did an awesome job of putting the application together. Ecology came through with a good funding offer of $5 million in grant and $21 million in low interest loan. So that's good. But that $21 million loan does need to get paid off over 30 years. So that will require rates to be increased to pay that loan back. So we were hoping, to get more grant monies, and we continue to look for more grant money. So on the next slide, I'll talk about that a little bit. But so we're continuing to look at other options. In terms of the ecology funding offer, the loan payback would begin 1 year after completion of the project. That's generally Ecology's terms. And so Ecology is open to the idea of allowing us to kind of drag the project out over 3 or 4 years, maybe breaking phase 1 into a couple different phases over the next 3 years or so, to allow us some maybe 4 years till we have to start paying that loan back. So that would provide a bit of a grace period to gradually raise rates if this is the path we end up wanting to take. So that's a little bit of good news. And Ecology, that was just a draft funding offer list that came out in January. The final agreements aren't expected till around November. So between now and then, we're continuing to look at other funding sources to try and lessen the burden on the ratepayers. So we have till about November to decide whether or not we want to accept that Ecology funding offer. Next slide, please. So there's a few other potential funding alternatives that we're considering. One is the USDA.
I'm sorry, Councilmember Williams has her hand raised.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes.
I'm sorry, I don't know if you can even see that, but on Ecology's funding offer, can we just take the grant and not the loan if we find other grants?
No, we can't. That's part of their, well, part of their funding offer list is their grant offer is a $5 million max that Ecology offers. And so we've reached that max. And we asked them if we could find other funding opportunities. Is there more grant that we could give? Or part of their offer is they look at your total hardship. And so they look at what your current rates are and how much they think that you could afford to pay. And so if we could find another, let's see, I think they said that they could offer us with that loan package a total of $8 million in grant. So if we found another $2 or $3 million in grant, then that would work with their funding offer package.
Okay.
The thing is, though, with Ecology's funding offer, if we accept their offer, we can begin spending the grant right away. And so, after November, if we're able to find additional grant monies, basically we can use that to pay off the loan without any penalty or interest rate payment with it. So that is one feasible option with the Ecology funding offer.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. So the other couple funding alternatives we're looking at is the USDA. They're another source of funding. It's similar to Ecology. They have different loan terms. They're usually a little bit higher interest rate, but potentially they could offer a little bit more grant. So we're working on a funding application with USDA right now. And then this other potential alternative is something that's come about in the last month or so. This is what we'll spend the rest of this little presentation talking about, is this regional solution, which would be a partnership with the city of Walla Walla and the port of Walla Walla, and potentially funded by Ecology. Next slide, please. So the reason that this regional problem came up is that each of you three entities have some wastewater challenges of your own. I'll be a little bit different. The first one is the port is struggling with some recent high-strength waste surcharges from the city of Walla Walla. So recently, the city of Walla Walla realized that their high-strength dischargers, so typically wineries, breweries, and other industries, should be paying a little bit more of their fair share compared to the typical residential homeowner. So they commissioned a study and they came up with a way to charge these users a higher rate. And they're going to slowly be implementing it over the next 5 years or so. And so it particularly hits the port pretty hard because they have a lot of industrial wineries and breweries out near the airport. And so this is a problem that they're struggling with right now. So there's a problem that needs to be solved there with the port. Also, the city of Walla Walla, they have several upgrades planned for their wastewater treatment plant over the next several years, just as part of some of the renewals and replacements of their treatment plant, in addition to providing a little bit more capacity. And then, of course, your project, the wastewater treatment plant phase 1 project, would require some rate increases if we accept this Ecology funding offer and move forward with it. And so the port and Walla, and your city administrator and Walla Walla city administrator have been getting together talking about what are some different ways we can get legislature to help fund some of these problems. And the response that they heard was, if you can come up with some sort of a regional solution that might be more attractive for grant funding through legislature. So this is something we're looking to try and put together. Next slide, please. the problem is in terms, each entity has different issues to solve, and some of the boundaries that we have to work within in terms of finding a regional solution. The big one is the water rights impairment issue. And you might remember us talking about this when we were doing your facility plan and evaluating different options. This can be a bit of a deal breaker when it comes to wastewater, because every wastewater treatment plant produces an effluent, and some people are reliant upon that effluent. And so if you take that away, it might impair their water rights. In particular, Walla Walla's wastewater treatment plant, there are 2 irrigation districts that have water rights to their effluent. They've had them for over 100 years. And that's why the Walla Walla wastewater treatment plant was one of the first, what we call Class A reclamation plants, where they treat it to a very high level because they have to provide it to those irrigation districts for irrigation. And so because of that, Walla Walla's wastewater treatment plant likely is never going to move from its existing location because it needs to provide irrigation to those 2 irrigation districts. Likewise, with your wastewater treatment plant, if you remember when we did an impairment analysis on your effluent, it was determined that although there are a few irrigators on Garrison Creek, and remember you discharge to the creek in the winter, but you land apply on crops in the summer. So we're really talking about that winter discharge that you have into Garrison Creek. There are a few irrigators downstream on Garrison Creek, but their water rights predated when your wastewater treatment plant was discharging to that creek. So in other words, their water rights were never reliant upon your effluent. So there wouldn't be an impairment if we stopped discharging to Garrison Creek. But there was an impairment issue in the Walla Walla River, and it was a minimum flow required for fish. And so because of that minimum flow requirement and that impairment, we decided that we wanted to keep sending your effluent to Garrison Creek when we were looking at different alternatives for your wastewater treatment plant. However, that impairment is in the Walla Walla River. And so, I have messages into Ecology and the Walla Walla Water Master just to confirm this, but I think one potential regional solution would be to pump your sewage to Walla Walla, because in the wintertime, they discharge into Mill Creek, and that eventually makes it to the Walla Walla River at that point of compliance that they're looking at Detour Road. So in terms of a feasible solution for some regional solution, this is really the only one that has any merit worth considering, is pumping all of your sewage to Walla Walla. And again, I'm confirming this with Ecology to make sure that this has legs, that it really would be a feasible solution. Next slide, please. So what this would look like, we briefly evaluated it in the facility plan in terms of all the different alternatives we wanted to look at. And it was mentioned very briefly and was quickly discounted, mostly because of the challenges with the politics and College Place kind of wanting to retain its sovereignty away from Walla Walla. So it wasn't looked at very carefully. But if we did consider that alternative a little bit more, it could potentially be a lower capital cost. So your phase 1 project was $26 million. This instead, what it would be likely is just building a pumping plant to pump it all the way to Walla Walla. It's about 3 miles, so it's a long ways to pump it, but it could potentially be a lower capital cost than what has been identified for your phase 1 upgrades at your treatment plant. And the other benefit is it would eliminate your discharge permit. So you wouldn't need to have your discharge permit with Ecology anymore. You would just be pumping it to Walla Walla's, and Walla Walla would have and operate the discharge permit. Some of the negatives with this idea is you basically would then be teaming with Walla Walla for your wastewater treatment and disposal. And so because of that, there are a lot of challenges where we need to resolve a fair rate structure and some fair connection fees and an ability for you to have a voice about future upgrades. For example, if capacity runs out at Walla Walla's treatment plant, that you have some way of saying, well, we want to do some upgrades so that we can grow further into the future. So some of those issues would definitely need to be worked out. Next slide, please. And so what we're looking at right now is a regional study. And in this regional study, there are 3 key elements that we're looking at, and we're developing the scope of work for this study now. So we're welcome to feedback if some of you have some ideas on other things to include in this study. But one of the big key elements is with College Place, evaluating the feasibility to cost and pump the cost to pump your sewage to Walla Walla. Second key element being Walla Walla, what impact that has on Walla Walla's wastewater treatment plant and their planned upgrades. And then the third, with the port, is identifying some solutions for their industrial wastewater out there. Next slide, please. So in terms of the College Place focus of this study, we would identify a potential force main route for that 3-mile-long pipeline between your plant and the Walla Walla plant. We develop a cost opinion for that. And then we'd also evaluate this idea of feasibility for storage and pumping at night. So right now you have 3 big tanks that you store your wastewater in, and that provides your biological treatment. Those tanks can be mixed and they can be aerated. One idea is to store all of your sewage in those tanks during the day and then pump that sewage to Walla Walla at night. And the benefit of that is typically the wastewater treatment plant sees all of its flow and load during the day when we're all using water and creating sewer. And at night, it tends to be a bit of an unused asset. And so if we were able to store your sewage during the day and pump it to Walla Walla at night, I think that's a pretty creative way of sending your waste to Walla Walla and minimizing the impact it would have on their treatment plant. So that would be something that we would evaluate as part of the study as well. So we would keep your influent screens operational at your wastewater treatment plant and store your wastewater in your SBRs, which is what the acronym we use for the 3 tanks that you store your wastewater in, and then pump it during the night. So those would be things that we would focus on in terms of the College Place part of the study. Next slide, please. And then in terms of the Walla Walla focus of this regional study, it would be evaluating the impact of corrosive and odorous sewage. So if we have a 3-mile-long pipeline where we're pumping your waste to Walla Walla, that's kind of a long residence time for sewage to be in a pipeline. So it'll tend to go septic in that pipeline, and that'll lead to it'll be pretty odorous when it comes out the other end of the pipeline, and there will be some potential corrosion there too. So there are some things we will need to do where your pipeline dumps into Walla Walla's system to address the odors and the corrosion, certainly things that can be mitigated. And then also evaluate what impact that has on Walla Walla's wastewater treatment plant, and then identify and summarize some of the timing of their planned projects and potentially the need for speeding up the need to implement some of those planned projects. Next slide, please.
Councilmember Selby?
Oh, yes.
Williams?
Sorry, I don't see the hands.
Yeah, I don't think you can see the hands. So, well, I just had a question. I was wondering about whether we would need to somehow mix the sewage that was sitting there to keep it from settling. And then when you bring up the corrosive, I'm wondering if aerating that sewage might prevent settling, so we have to deal with all the stuff on the bottom, and reduce the corrosive and odorous.
Yes, certainly. Those are absolutely a couple things to look at. The SBR tanks that you have now, they do have the ability to mix without adding air. So how they operate now is all of your sewage as it comes to your plant now is directed to one of these tanks. And then that tank is continuously mixed to prevent the settling out, as you mentioned, but not impart a bunch of air to it until it's needed. And then once the tank fills up, then the treatment phase starts, where it turns on aerators and it aerates and creates an activated sludge and begins your biological treatment part of the process. One of the things we'll look at is whether it would make sense to do some of that aeration in addition to the mixing in those tanks, and provide a little bit of pre-treatment potentially. One of the benefits of that might help with some biological nutrient removal at Walla Walla's plant if we're able to do some of that. So in terms of evaluating using part of your wastewater treatment plant to provide some of that pre-treatment, we'll definitely be looking at both mixing and potentially aerating the waste in those tanks.
Thank you. Yeah, aeration is going to be tricky because it's also very expensive in terms of power.
That's exactly right. Yeah. Yeah, so we'll have to kind of weigh the costs and benefits of that.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, you bet. So then the third area of focus of this regional study, the port focus of the study, will evaluate some of their historical flows and loads and the fees that they're being assessed by the city of Walla Walla. And we have several different alternatives in mind to evaluate for the port. One being potentially pre-treatment at some of their higher flow wineries. Another option potentially being some sort of centralized storage system and pumping at night, similar to what we're considering with your wastewater, pumping it to Walla Walla's plant at night when there's less of an impact. Another potential option is separating their collection system. So right now, all of their industrial wastewater and sanitary wastewater are collected in the same collection system. So we might look at maybe building a different collection system so that the sanitary wastewater could continue going to the city of Walla Walla, or maybe the industrial wastewater could be treated differently. And then potentially some system improvements to remove some extraneous flow. So looking at some of their flows, they tend to be pretty high in February and March. And I believe that's likely inflow from roof drains and storm events. And so there's potentially some ways to lower their flows that way. So those would be some of the port specific focus areas of this regional study. Yes, next slide, please. And so this overall regional project, if it really comes all together, it would include those three elements: a College Place lift station and force main, upgrades to Walla Walla's plant, and then some infrastructure at the port to handle their industrial wastewater. And again, the whole idea of this regional project is if we come up with a regional solution, it might be attractive for some legislative funding. Next slide, please. So in terms of a schedule for the study, as I mentioned, right now we're developing the scope of work for the study right now. And Mike could probably speak to this better than me, but it's likely to be funded by Ecology completely. And again, in terms of the schedule, we're endeavoring to try and get this study completed by October so that it gives you enough information to make a decision about whether you want to accept the phase one wastewater treatment plant project and the ecology funding package as it is, or if you see enough potential in this regional plan to switch gears and look at incorporating this regional plan instead. Next slide, please. So this last slide is what I think, for me as an engineer, this is the hard part. This is the part I'm not very good at. This is the part where you guys come to play, is the politics. So a couple of things I'm not envisioning being part of the study, but they definitely need to be resolved, would be if you decide to pump all of your wastewater to Walla Walla, what do the rates look like? What do the connection fees look like? And what kind of an agreement can we put in place? And the agreement would definitely need to have a lot of thought put in it to be fair for you, because you're losing a little bit of control over your community's ability to grow to a certain extent. So such an agreement needs to be put together in a way where you feel comfortable. Well, yes, we have a rate figured out for the sewage we're going to send you now, but what if College Place grows faster than Walla Walla? And who lays claim to some of the available capacity in Walla Walla's plant? And when that plant runs out of capacity, it's time for an upgrade. Who gets to drive making an upgrade happen? So some of the issues on the flow and load allocation limits, one potential way to address this concern is to form a sewer district between Walla Walla and College Place, where there's a separate entity that is a sewer district, and there's a board that is put in place to make the decisions for that sewer district. So that's something to consider. But so anyways, the engineering part aside, this I think is a very big challenge that also needs to be considered within the, over the next 6 to 7 months to give you enough information to make a decision on it.
Councilmember Jessup.
Hi, Alex. Thanks for the presentation. You had mentioned that the likelihood, we don't know, of course, the likelihood of Ecology paying for a grant when it's a joint venture. Do they also get involved when there are upgrade questions and paying for upgrades when there's expansion in the cities and that kind of stuff?
Absolutely. Yeah. So Ecology, they're who we have the funding. So right now, the funding offer that we have in hand is from Ecology. So generally speaking, they have a call for projects every October. And so we put in the funding application to Ecology, and they gave us a pretty generous offer with the $5 million grant and the $21 million loan. It's just that they're bound by the WAC they can only offer a maximum $5 million grant. So I think that with this regional plan, the source of funding would likely be some sort of direct appropriation or earmark through legislature rather than through Ecology. The Ecology will pay for this study. They have a certain amount of money set aside to help pay for studies and things like this. But I think when it comes to fund the actual regional solution, we'd be looking, bigger than Ecology, looking at legislature for some sort of appropriation.
Perfect. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Rizzatello?
Yeah, and I just want to provide a little bit of a synopsis how we got here, because I know from the trajectory we were on historically, it's a bit unique, and I'll couch it that way. So the general concept of a regional thing was something that I broached with Walla years ago when I first started here. The issue at the time was, while the city staff of both cities get along very well together, I would say I'll just couch it this way, there were political issues with the council on the other side at the time, where it appeared we were going to hit a brick wall. So we were going this route. However, as you recall, when we were working through the plans early on, while phase one, it's a large hill to climb with various grants and loans and other things you can climb it. The issue is, if you also recall, there was a phase 2, 3, and 4, which, I mean, hopefully the state wouldn't bark up that tree, but who knows? And the issue there is that was like tens of millions of dollars above this even, where if we end up in that nexus, I think we would be in a world of hurt. And I would argue it's, even with loans and other things, it's beyond our means. Now move up to present day, what has occurred. So City of Walla, while they aren't on an emergency track as like we are, I was informed that in the relative midterm future, they have to put in about $25 million worth of improvements as well. Then the port came along because they're dealing with that wine surcharge issue. And in talking with Walla, I would say the general behaviors and I would say previous issues surrounding a regional concept have seemed to, in general, evaporate. So they very much are open-minded to this concept afoot here. Also, talking with legislators for our own project, knowing that, $21 million, that's a lot of money to finance. I was trying to get a direct appropriation from them for our own wastewater project. While I'll say the appropriation is still alive, multiple comments were made by the legislative delegation, knowing that this Walla project is also in the periphery, regardless of us. It would be good to essentially have a regional plant. That way there's essentially a uniform way for these legislative requests, and basically dropping hints that as long as there were two separate ones, it was going to be an issue to get appropriations. We've talked with Ecology about parsing this out some, or even if they were on board for this regional thing, and if it could all work, they seemed fairly open to a lot more than I thought they were going to be. Also the sub phase and as well. Now, the appropriations, I asked Alex to develop a scope of work, as has Nabil and Pat, because in talking with the legislature, we believe we're able to squeeze in an earmark in the operational portion of the budget for Department of Ecology, and in general, Department of Ecology seemed open to it. So we believe there is a pathway to get this majority grant funded ASAP. So that way you all have the decisions in hand in November, which way to essentially go on this. I think it's very important though, while I definitely do believe in the benefit of having our own plan and in doing all of that. My fear is that if we're ever put into that phase 2, 3, and 4 issue where we need to be out of the creek like year round, just the amount of land you need coupled with the amount of money you need, that would put us in a world of hurt. So one has to question, while the going is good, should we look at this regionalization concept? Because while it would hurt, we could do phase 1 on our own. But if we're ever made to do those future phases, I think that's going to definitely put us in a pickle on multiple fronts. And who knows, maybe this works, maybe it doesn't, but at least while it seems like we have willing partners and then also monetary contribution from the legislature, investigate it. The concept about a sewer district, I've discussed that with Nabil because where I went to college, I had a similar issue down at University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. And while both cities still maintain their own collection system, in Urbana-Champaign, the trunk mains, the lift stations, and then both treatment plants are under the auspices of the Urbana-Champaign sanitary district, and it works relatively well. So I think there are some lessons to be learned there. So yeah, that's a little synopsis about why all of a sudden it's reared its head, because there's some money there, and then it also seems like we have a willing partner right now as well.
Mhm.
Alex, do you have any more to share?
Nope, that was the end of my presentation.
All right, we're going to go through council members just in case there's more questions, or comments. And Councilmember Jessup, any questions, comments?
No questions or comments. Thank you very much for the informative presentation.
Councilmember Cleveland?
I mean, engineering wise, it looks like a great idea. The thing that worries me most is the politics, because, things might be looking great now, but, years down the road, we get different councils. And I guess it just makes me uncomfortable for sure, especially since we've had some challenges in the past. I guess another thought I have here is our main source of water is from the aquifer. We don't have like a river that we're connected to that we pull from and treat. And it's kind of been tossed out a couple of times, the idea of maybe treating the wastewater to a high level and then pumping it into the aquifer to reduce loss or potentially recharge it to some degree. I don't know if we lose that capacity or if it's something that the Walla wastewater treatment plant would be capable of doing. But I'd kind of hate to lose that option since we don't have a lot of other great water sources if, with climate change occurred to the point where like we have to start mining the aquifer and then, oh shoot, now what do we do? Because we're so low that we can't meet our need. It'd just be bad to lose that option. So I don't know if that's really a valid fear or not, but it's just a couple of thoughts I have.
Yeah, I think it's a valid concern. I mean, the day will come we're already seeing how valuable water is, and the day will come where we're treating the wastewater to that really high level because water is such a precious resource. So you're right, that is a valid concern. If the decision's made to send all of the sewage to Walla, it's a problem that they have to deal with, but it's also an opportunity to deal with that water in the future as it becomes a more valuable resource. But on the other hand, if you do come together and form a sewer district, this idea of College Place versus Walla somewhat goes away, in that the sewer district can make joint decisions about the best way to benefit and utilize that water if it's a precious resource.
I don't think I have any other questions. Thank you.
Councilmember Peterson?
Yeah, I guess, part of the answer to that also would be the written agreement that would outlive councils and administrations and whatnot, as far as so that growth would not be cut back, from one area to the other. I guess the one question I have is, Alex, what if we do nothing? I'm intrigued by the whole regional agreement, but what happens if we do nothing? Do we have that choice?
Yeah, so the do nothing would basically, so right now in your discharge permit with Ecology, there's a compliance schedule. And the compliance schedule has required you to do the facility plan, which you've checked that box, to design improvements, which you've checked that box. And then the final box is to get the improvements that were identified constructed by the end of 23. And so if we don't do that, those would be violations of your permit with Ecology. And those could result in fines from Ecology. And then the other potential issue, and Ecology has noted that they're willing to kind of extend the schedule and have some grace with the schedule in terms of a deadline, as long as you're making progress on addressing their concerns. But the other issue, aside from Ecology, is the potential for third-party lawsuits. And so there are some folks out there that are in watchdog groups that are watching discharge permits for some communities and waiting for them to come out of compliance so that they can sue them. And so that's a potential litigation source. And oftentimes all they're really doing is suing a small community and then settling out of court just to get their attention and get some money out of them. So those would be the potential consequences of doing nothing.
So Alex, so we're really, so you look at that expense, right, versus taking on a $20 million loan, and then who knows what else is phase 2, 3, 4, whatever. It's really not an unfunded mandate, but it's a here's a large grant that you're going to get, but on the other hand, if we don't go regional, you're being forced into this corner where you're going to have to accept this cost anyway, correct?
Yes.
One follow-up question. If we go to a regional, would there be a reduction in the contract cost of running the current wastewater plant?
Potentially there would be, yes. Especially if we decide that we do not need to aerate the waste as it sits in your tanks, because as it was previously noted, it's a big energy cost. So yes, your operational cost could potentially go down, and also the capital cost could potentially go down quite a bit as well. So it could result in some definite savings compared to the plan that's in place right now for phase 1, both in capital cost and operational cost.
Thanks, Alex.
Mr. Rizzatello, you have something to contribute to?
Yes.
Topic?
Yes, I just wanted to add a little bit about the do nothing option, because I witnessed it when I was over in Colfax, because back when I was city administrator there, Department of Ecology is doing these TDML studies, trying to make all little small communities out there come into compliance. One of the cities upstream of us was the town of Garfield, and they actually did exactly what the question you were posing, because it was going to amount to a large improvement. They only have like 400 people over there, and I was fascinated because if they won, it would bode well for Colfax. The issue is that what I quickly learned is that Ecology, they have the ability of fining up to $25,000 a day. And then do court orders, and apparently they don't mind like making examples out of jurisdictions, because after the amount went to 250,000, Garfield tapped out and ended up having to do it anyway, and they didn't waive a lot of the costs, basically to illustrate a point. So I just want to testify on that, the fact that I basically witnessed a neighboring municipality call a bluff and essentially lose fairly bad. So that's why I'm trying to get ahead of this.
Thanks, Mike, for that clarification.
Councilmember Williams.
Just a few thoughts. I share Councilmember Cleveland's concerns because of the history between the two cities. And so because of that, I'm very much in favor of the sewer district. However, I have to admit, I haven't kept up with this since it wasn't my job anymore, but for many years, King County ran the treatment plants and each city ran their collection. Well, when King County started doing reclaimed water, it turned into a huge issue about, well, who owns that water? And, you know, everybody thought they did. So I think part of the founding documents of the sewer district, if you will, should be that the cities and the port get the first use of that water for beneficial use, because often what happens with reclaimed water is golf courses can outbid anybody and they end up with the water. So I think we'd want to avoid that. So in one way, it feels like ducking our responsibility just a little bit, but on the other way, it really seems like an elegant solution to say, we'll put together a district that includes all of the affected people, that focuses on this issue, and all the other things that we, you know, tussle about don't get dragged into it. So obviously have to see the study, have to see what it's going to look like, what the options are. But I think the district could very well be a way to go. And I definitely want to underscore Mike's comments about let's not call Ecology's bluff, because even if Ecology were to back down, as Mike said, there are people who do third-party lawsuits and they can do up to $250,000 per day per violation. So it can add up. You know, most people have the opportunity to violate like 20 times a day. So, you know, it adds up really quickly. And there are some who are doing this primarily for the sake of the water, and they tend to write compliance schedules and just enough money to get cover their costs. And then there are those who are doing it for the money, and they will just hold you hostage, get the money, and then you're stuck with no money and a big problem. So anyway, yeah, Mike is right. Don't do that.
Councilmember Sherman.
I don't have any questions. This was a ton of information. I like what Melody was just sharing. So,
Councilmember Boyle.
I don't have any questions at this point. It'll be interesting to see what the rest of the studies show. And I agree. I think that if we do end up merging and doing this as a joint venture, that the separate district actually would be probably the best way to go. But thank you for all that information and for the update of where things are going.
All right. Any other questions or comments? All right. Alex, thank you so much as always for being here and being so informative. We appreciate your time.
Yeah, you're welcome.
You have a very good evening.
Thank you.
Okay, let's move on. We have the Tamarison Road Speed Safety Study, and Mike will be presenting for Mr. McAndrews on that.
Thank you. So this is relatively straightforward. So DKS, they were contracted with the county and then City of Walla, and we kicked in a small amount because we have the smallest portion of this corridor, because there's a lot of inconsistent speeds and it goes like all over the place when it goes from Tamarison to Prospect to Reeser Road. Based on the traffic counts, crash data, and then general behaviors, what you'll see in the resulting memo that's attached to this is basically a recommendation for our portion and really most of the other portions to go to 35. So if you go to page 10 on the slide, just because I'm more of a Cliff's Notes person trying to get to the crux of the data here. What DKS recommended was that, with the exception of the area right by Prospect Point Elementary School and Walla High School, that section up in there should be your typical school zone speed limit, but that the inconsistent and lower speed limits were causing more issues than they were worth, and essentially moving the rest of it up to 35. What I was waiting for, since they have the lion's share of the corridor, was what was the county and the city of Walla going to do? Because when you work out on a percentage basis, about 88% of this corridor is in the other jurisdictions, so they're driving a lot of this. And both of them essentially have gone toward following this recommended limit. This was presented a while ago to our Utilities Commission as well, but that's really what's before you for consideration, moving to that uniform 35 speed limit within the small section that's within our jurisdiction. And you can see the attached memo that goes through the general theory behind everything and the various traffic data that they collected. DKS, they'll be on the next council meeting, so you could ask them a little more detailed questions on it. I just want to make sure this was in front of you, so you could essentially start examining the data, or if there's things I need to relate to them, let me know.
Okay, thank you, Mike. So the current postings on page 5, if anybody has not been able to see that one, just so you can see, we right now on our part have 3 speed limits. Is that correct, Mike? 3 different ones from 25.
We basically have 2 of them.
Okay,
so
2.
We have 25 from SR 125 up until you get near the Knapp Addition subdivision. When you get up to the Knapp Addition, the west side of that, then it goes up to 35, and then you're out of town at Justice, and it goes into City of Walla at that juncture.
Okay. I don't even see how we could go 30 on those wiggly roads there. It's a bunch of turns, right? Going from coming off of 125.
Well, I mean, we would basically put like warning signs about the turns, but I ride that quite a bit on my bike, and the fact of the matter is people are doing that for the most part anyway, from what I've observed riding it. So
okay, all right, let's go through council members for questions or comments. Councilmember Jessup.
No current questions or comments. Thank you.
Councilmember Cleveland.
No questions. Thanks for the presentation.
Councilmember Peterson.
Oh, thanks, Mike. I fully support this. We had some friends from California that bought a house on that road here recently, and they were quizzing me on the cafeteria of a style of different speed limits there, and yeah, it was hard to support most of it. So yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Councilmember Williams.
No comments or questions. Thank you.
Councilmember Sherman.
No questions. I drive that road frequently, so it would be nice to have some uniformity.
Yeah. Councilmember Boyle.
No questions. This is good.
All right. I think that was pretty easy, Mike. Thank you. Let's move on to the creation of the Walla Walla Valley Creative District. And Mr. Zatello continues presenting.
Okay. Thank you. So this creative district, that's a relatively new initiative that was started by Washington Arts Commission in the state back in 2017. And it's basically an economic development program, and jurisdictions, namely cities, can apply for it. And not only do you get the signage at your creative district, but it does open you up to other grant programs. So they initially earmark it for 5,000, but then they actually have a designated capital program just for art that it opens up to, and it's a variety of art. And the general issue, we've been talking with this with Art Walla and the city of Walla Walla for a long time, actually prior to COVID, but then this took the back burner about doing a joint district. So that way, in general, there's a little more of a straightforward work plan. And Art Walla, since they are the art organization that deals in both communities, that essentially it would just be in general a better thing to try to do this jointly. While the Washington Arts Commission, they have not seen a joint one. They understand that in essence we're essentially we're so close together, it makes sense since there's a lot of organizations essentially doing operations in both communities. So this is going to be going before City of Walla Walla, Art Walla. They've already taken this up, and then Downtown Foundation as well. But in general, the concept I'm going to be seeking your permission for would be to pass a resolution saying, hey, we're turning this in jointly with Walla Walla to do a Valley Creative District. As you probably noticed in the map, it doesn't go up to the port area, and that's because in the enabling legislation, it doesn't include counties. So you actually have to be just within incorporated cities. So that's why this stays for the most part this stays within the city limits. And in general with this, the resolution which is attached, the draft one, says that we'll work at this together, but for some reason, if Arts Washington says, hey, we can't turn in a joint one, that we would essentially go our own way on this, because again, no one has done a joint application, so this is a little bit of newer ground. But this opens us up for funds to help with the public art projects, because as you all probably have witnessed, we basically have scraped together resources to do that. I mean, the Traffic Box Art Project, that was P1FCU paying for that. And then same with a lot of the other art pieces that we've been pursuing. While we are writing grants for it, it takes a long time to amass that money. And if it opens it up to essentially another bucket of capital, that would be a very good thing. So that way we could facilitate getting art and stuff sooner. So that is just what's in front of you. But if you all give me a green light on this, we will essentially, the next meeting, it will go for a decision, but we'll work with them and see if this will pass Art Washington's muster. I would say this general concept has gone before our economic development and our parks board, and both of them are supporting this concept as it stands.
All right, like it. Let's go for any questions or comments, Mr. Jessup.
So what you're saying is you just found more ways to write more grants to get more money. City beautification. Is that what you did for us?
Yeah, essentially, more money.
You love those grants. Thank you very much, Mike.
Mr. Cleveland.
No questions. Thanks for looking for more money. Appreciate it.
Mr. Peterson.
Yeah, no question. I fully support the concept. Thank you.
Ms. Williams.
I really support this. I have really enjoyed having more community art around. And so I think this is great because so often it seems like everybody thinks art should be the lowest priority and it really shouldn't. So thank you.
Ms. Sherman.
I agree. I'm excited about this. Thank you, Mike.
Yep. Ms. Boyle.
No questions. This is really fun.
You know, when I first got appointed way back when as mayor, one of the first things I told Mike is I would love to see public art in the city. And, you know, I just said that. I said, I would love to see public art. I don't know what it would look like, but I'd love to see it. A few months later, Mike came up with the art reps, right? So yay. Mike, this is great. Thank you.
Yep.
All right. Last item, I believe, on our agenda is the ambulance utility rates, and Mr. Carlton will present on that.
Thank you, Mayor. Here's in our last meeting on the presentation of the different rate options for an ambulance utility. We were tasked with going back and looking at a method of allocation based on the use of the EMS service. As you recall, definitely the fire EMS staff is overworked at the city, and it has been determined that to relieve some of that stress on staff, that we need additional 4 firefighter/EMS employees. That was included in our 2022 budget, which has an estimated deficit of just over $900,000, of which $500,000 of that is attributable to ambulance/EMS and the balance to fire. Historically, the current expense fund has provided $400,000 approximately per year to fund that deficit. The extra $500,000 is attributable to those additional staff. So it's not sustainable for the current expense fund to afford that extra $500,000 a year. It's just not sustainable. We can manage it for a couple years, but not sustainable long term. As a result, we are presenting the ambulance utility as a method of funding that requirement to get our fire EMS up to where it needs to be. Previous examples, we've looked at rates based on different methods, but it was challenged to look at rates that are based on the demand of the service. I'll share my screen and bring up some information. So what we did is we looked at 2021. We looked at the amount of time that the fire department spends on calls, and they tracked that down to the minute. So we did and looked at all the incidents that happened, what percentage of the total time was associated to EMS. Based on that analysis, we came up to 14% of the time was spent on EMS calls. So when we're looking at that $500,000 deficit, you can see in the first column, we have demand, not the first column, but under the section that says demand, you can see that what our incident count was for the year at 1,429. We are trying to absorb that 14% of the deficit of $500,000 based on the demand. So as you can see, there's $70,000 we're trying to absorb through the people that use the service. We broke up the customer categories into those amounts you see on the left, and we can allocate those based on the incidents. And then we can adjust the percentages to see about how that demand charge would be allocated amongst those different categories. For example, you can see the single family, they had 84 incident counts in 2021, which is 5.9% of the total, and they would get charged that portion based on that $70,000 of demand charge. Now, the balance of that demand, when they're not out on call, it's availability. That availability needs to be shared amongst all users of the system. So then we're allocating that $430,000 amongst those same categories based on the number of ERUs. This ERU is the same calculation we've used previously, and what it does is it brings down an equivalent amount to a single family residence. So we're taking the square footage of all the buildings within College Place and dividing them by a standard size of a single family residence, which is 1,985 square feet. So we're calculating what all those ERUs are based on that analysis. And there's 5,451 equivalent single family residences in College Place. So we allocate that percentage among the different ERUs based on the same customer categories to come up with an allocation of the $430,000. And you can see the different components there by line item. One thing you should notice that in the demand charge is that the nursing homes do have a large number of incidents, but it's really over a small number of ERUs. So they're absorbing a large demand charge. And you can see that in the total chart. So I combine those two numbers to come up with a total amount that's allocated to each customer category. And then we divide that by the equivalent ERUs. And resulting in a charge per ERU. And you can see the different numbers there. Single family residents would be charged $671 per month, $80.55 for the year per single family residence. Multifamily, which is anything from duplex up for apartments, would be based on that calculation of ERU. So we take the total of square footages and we divide it by that 1985 to come up with an equivalent unit. Although their units may be smaller than that, that's how the calculation is going to be fair across the board. So they would result in $8.04 per ERU. The nursing homes considerably higher because they consume 31.3% of the incidents. Therefore, they would absorb a larger charge, which is $55.89 per ERU. In the next slide, I've done some examples of what those charges would result in based on that ERU number. The commercial would be $751, and the public, schools, and college would be $698. And then we were talking about a phased approach, 33% in 2022, looking at implementation date of July 1. Full year next year would get hit with 67% and then 100% charge in 2024. And we feel confident that current expense can absorb the remainder of that difference over that 3-year time frame. The second option is to average weight the total charge per ERU. Same philosophy on calculating the ERU, but coming up with an average rate for everybody, not going to look at the demand or availability. And that rate would be $759 per ERU. A lot simplistic on the calculation, but does not charge directly the users that that consume the service. That being said, is there anybody have questions at this point?
I do not see any, Brian.
So I hope everybody can see that. I'll try to zoom in a bit here. So here are some examples. Of course, the single family residence is pretty simple. They're considered the base ERU, so they would get $671 per month. You can see the yearly charge at $852. Option 2, you can see they would pay a little higher rate to absorb the lost revenue from the nursing homes at the average rate. It would be $759, so an extra $10.50 a year. You can see in multifamily residence, I gave some examples there of how it's calculated. And you can see the ERUs, the College Place 17 Associates apartment complex is ERUs are 10. They would get a yearly charge of $965. You can see they would get a little bit lower rate if on the average rate, and they would pay $910. And you can see the different numbers Of course, Villages of Garrison Creek isn't really a multifamily, but from our perspective, they're set up as one customer, and we send the bill to them. They allocate it out to the different homes within that property, so it's included in the multifamily. You can see in the nursing homes, a lot of those facilities, we're assuming that 50% of their beds are Medicare, and according to the RCW, we cannot charge Medicare beds. So then therefore you can see the number of ERUs they absorb at a much higher rate based on their demand at 55.89. And you can see what their charge would be per year per facility. And then if it was average weighted, then they would pay significantly less. You can see they would save a large portion. They're going from Regency, for example, going from $10,000 charge per year down to $1,366 per year. The commercial, you can see I've put some examples there based on the square footage. Those square footages come directly from the King County or from Walla County website on assessed value. The big one there is Walmart. You can see that they would pay about $9,300 a year based on option 1, option 2 a little bit higher. They'd be not, close to $9,500 per year. The schools, as far as the website for the county, they identify all the public schools going to the school district 250. You can see the total square footage there. So they would be absorbing under option 1 close to $9,400. For the average option, it would be a little higher than that at close to $9,500. You can see there's examples of the churches and what impact it has on them. They don't have quite as many ERUs based on their size, but then again, they would absorb that charge. The big one is the Walla University, and that is their total building square footage based on the county website, a large number of ERUs, and they would be charged close to $29,000 under scenario 1, under option 2, close to $32,000. And then you can see the City College Place, based on their square footage, would pay between $2,300 and $2,500 per year. And then the City of Walla does have some property that we bill, and they would also be charged at that same $698 rate. So what we're really presenting this for is we really want to have dialogue about what option you're willing to support. We'd like to take this to council at the first main meeting in April. If there's more work need to be done on beating this horse, then you need to let me know so I can bring back other options.
All right, thank you, Brian. Councilmember Jessup, we'll begin with you with questions or comments.
No, thank you for having a little bit, it's a lot more detailed, a lot more clear for me in terms of the demand availability in comparison with some of the usage and that kind of stuff, and some clarity. Obviously, these are examples, about just to say out loud, this would include every commercial building that we have, the Del Taco, all of it, to
Yes.
all the way to the LLCs that are their address is within the city limits. So it includes all of those as well.
Yes, we have the list from the county of all the properties within College Place that have a building on it.
And so with these options, the rate, including all of those buildings, you're saying that it would make up for the lost revenue at the moment. You said like 500,000 just for the ambulance alone. All at that rate with option 1, demand availability, all those other buildings, it covers that 500,000.
Yes, both option 1 and 2 cover. The only really difference in option 2 is we're average weighting the ERU as opposed to using the demand and availability scenario.
Perfect.
It
Thank
still
you very much.
uses the ERU as the basis for calculating. And there are a number of entities within the state that are using the square footage ERU as a method, and one is Pasco, I believe, uses that method.
So there's precedent to it that you've looked into it.
Yes.
Thank you very much. This is very clear for me. Thank you.
Councilmember Cleveland.
I don't think I have any questions at this time. Thanks.
Councilmember Peterson.
Yeah, I'm not going to get into back and forth on this right now. I think my feelings are pretty clear on the square footage issue with the school, the Walla University. I would have hoped there would have been some creativity, maybe doing residential square footage of occupied dorm rooms or something like that. As it's stated here, I will not be supporting this when it comes to vote. Thanks.
Councilmember Williams.
I don't have any comments or questions.
Councilmember Sherman.
Yeah, she looked like she had so many. I thought I had a couple minutes. Yeah, I've got to agree with Lauren on this one. This one's a tough one to see presented this way. I appreciate all the information, though. It is nice to see the examples, but that's hefty.
Councilmember Boyle.
I echo her and Lauren's thoughts, but I don't have any questions at this point.
All right. Any no other questions or comments? Any directions for Brian and Mike? No. Mike, Brian, do you need anything further from us?
Well, is there any idea on the different options?
Councilmember Cleveland actually raised his hand.
Yeah, that the numbers for Walla University give me pause. I guess my question is actually kind of to Lauren here is like, what would you like to see?
Well, yeah, I think, I think when we're looking at residential families and we're looking at a Walmart and other things that are occupied, most of the time, I've made my statements in the past that you've got 90% of the buildings on that campus that are empty a majority of the time. To me, it would be interesting to see what it would look like if you looked at the residential halls, the boys' dorm, the girls' dorms, the college housing, where people are actually staying, sleeping, occupying like homes, multifamily, nursing homes, probably a lot of the commercial, perhaps. Instead of, to me, this is like a Boeing hangar somewhere with 500,000 square feet that you are going to allocate some. It just doesn't seem quite correct to me. And then I can't support it. So I would like to, I have the sneaking suspicion that if we looked at residential occupancy, dorms, student housing, that it would dramatically affect the square footage, and yet it would only affect the above rates by what I would consider immaterial amounts. But I think at the end of the day, I think I'm looking at something that's fair, and right now this is not, in my personal opinion, is not fair. So anyway.
Those are some good thoughts. Yeah, I'm inclined to say that there needs to be a distinction between an empty warehouse and something that actually is used as a residency. I don't know exactly what form that would take. It would certainly involve a lot of work, and I know our staff wants to involve that, and I know they're pretty overworked as it is. But yeah, those.
Yeah, I don't know if the residency could come up to 200, 300,000 square feet. I don't know, or it could be 100. I don't know, but it would be interesting, I think, just to see what that looks like. what the overall impact on the rest of the rates would be if that was pulled out of the calculation. But anyway, my personal opinion and where my vote will be.
Well, if I am to break down the college to that level, and then you could almost have the same argument with the churches in that the fact that they're only really occupied on the weekends. Schools are not occupied on the weekends. I mean, when do you stop getting exceptions to the rule?
I guess the exception is a 30,000 versus a 1,700. I guess that's interesting. You know, when you look at if you're gonna look at total student population, you know. I understand what you're saying. Churches.
I would need some way of determining what buildings are acceptable in this calculation.
Well, I could call you and tell you where the residency halls are at the college, or have someone from the college contact you. You want me to do that?
Well, I would need that information.
Okay, I'll reach out to them to give you this the buildings that are being occupied by students at night.
But don't forget that any amount you withdraw from Walla Walla University has to be absorbed by everybody else.
No, I understand that, and I think one of our conversations. And once again, I really don't want to get into this back and forth, which we did last time. But I think I think it raised the residential by, when I went back and looked at it, by like 40 cents. You know, if that was totally real, you know. So I understand that completely. But you're dividing it out over thousands versus one, you know. So anyway, and once again, it'd be interesting just to see what it looks like, you know, if you could just do it with residency. So yeah.
Well, if I have the documents from the county that show all the individual locations within the university. If I can supply that to somebody and they can tell me which ones are residences, then
yeah. And I think it's student housing off the campus too, perhaps. Well, when I say off the campus, that's probably but yeah, there are.
Well, it would be everything that's listed on the county list. Has all.
And once again, I would just like to see what that is compared to the vast buildings where we're, back to my argument of the allocation based on that. Anyway, yeah, maybe we can take a look at that. I'm sorry, we're going through this so many times. Once again, I think it's a fairness issue when you look down the column. But
well, just as an example, if we were to charge the rate based on just the number of accounts we have, so the number of bills we send out, not differentiating by who uses it or whatever. The rate would be $13.40 per month.
Right. No, I remember your presentations on that. I'm just saying that.
So
I think if that was divided, I think the last time when we looked at this, it raised the single family by 35 cents or 40 cents if you were to take half of the universities off. You know what I'm saying? So I would just like to see what that overall impact is. Yeah.
Councilmember Jessup.
So if I understand correctly, this is the previous presentation you had given us is allocating in the next 3 years, going 33, 66 to the 100%. So 3 years from now, let's assume all goes well in the plans and we've added multifamily homes, we've added businesses and so on and so forth. In 3 years' time, will that affect the rate in which everyone pays at that time? If there's that many more residencies and that kind of stuff, do you relook at it in 3 years and the council looks at it once more to see if it can be reallocated differently? The second question I have is in the same kind of thought process, if I understand correctly, like the public schools, you're talking Davis, Sager, CPHS. Are you also referring to like Rogers? And then on that case, you said the usage or the demand is 2.7 cents for public schools, colleges, and the schools. That's assuming then that the university, the public schools, Rogers, those three entities only use 2.7% of the demand of the ambulance services in a year?
Yes.
Okay, so the demand of all three of those entities is 2.7%.
Yeah, but don't forget, you're accounting for a large portion of availability, like just having the staff there.
That's right.
Able
right,
to,
but in the-
able to serve the public when needed.
Right,
And
so when you're,
definitely that demand is there when there's multiple calls out. Because
And
they
so if I
can't staff a second ambulance.
right, and if I understand, so help me, obviously I haven't been here that long, so that's, I'm trying to understand the background thought process. When you say the university square footage, that is separate than the homes in which they own and rent out? Or do those go under the category of single family and are charged accordingly?
Right now, they're going in as part of the college.
Great. Okay, thank you.
That's all the properties that they show owning on the county website.
That's right. Thank you. But those are tax exempt and other things that the city taxes, correct?
The college?
Yeah.
No, they just pay their utility
Property
bills.
tax, I'm sorry.
They don't pay
They
any
don't pay
property taxes.
Yeah,
They're
so
exempt
they're
from
exempt.
property taxes.
Right, so they're exempt from property tax. Otherwise, so those single family housings that they rent out and the buildings themselves are exempt from property tax then?
Yes.
Okay.
They pay a small amount of called what's water storage, plus their utility bills that they're charged.
Sure, usage. Yeah, okay.
Councilmember Williams?
It seems to me that part of the issue is the way we are dividing up the category. And so trying to put all the schools in one category makes it really strange. And trying to put all the university-owned properties into the university category also makes it very strange. So it seems to me like for simplicity, what we might want to do is schools and residential schools and separate those out. At the moment, as far as I know, we only have one residential school, but you know, that could change.
I don't know if I can get the incident records based on that factor though.
You don't know if you can get the incident records for Walla Walla University?
I don't know. David is not available, so I'm not. It's possible.
Because it seems like if they're in the 39, then what I would like to see, frankly, is the single family homes that the university owns be counted in with single family, but I don't know if that's possible because of the kind of data that we get. So that would just be a suggestion.
But it's still going to be a charge to the university because they own them.
Right.
And the differential rate between the two is like 20 cents per month.
But it gives the appearance of fairness. I personally am okay with the university seeming to pay a whole lot more because they don't pay the property tax, which I know only a very small amount of it comes to us, but still. But if we're concerned about that and trying to fix it, it seems like trying to lump something like Davis and the university into the same bucket is where we're probably having problems. And it seems like we should be able to figure out of those 39, which ones went to the university versus the kids' schools. So that's just my suggestion. I'm actually okay with it as it is myself, but apparently I'm in the minority.
Councilmember Peterson?
You know, I'm really not comfortable with, this is either an ambulance tax or it's a property tax. And I'm really uncomfortable with the conversations that this college or the schools or the churches are not paying their property tax share. And this is somehow a way of making up for that. That's not what this is. If you want to come up with another fee for the fact that places are not for profit status, that's an IRS question. This cannot be some sort of well, we're going to make it fair now because they don't pay the property tax. We get that. They also contribute to our community. This needs to be an ambulance tax issue. It needs to be fair. And I really do not appreciate, the crossover that somehow we're going to make this fair this way. And so that's what I've got to say on that. Thank you.
Mr. Cleveland?
Nowhere in my analysis does it come up with that. We were doing this as a presentation of trying to treat everybody on the same playing field and trying to come up with an ERU number that represents consistency across the board. That being a single family residence gets charged a certain amount should be fair in that charge to everybody else. So the method of this calculation was to determine, okay, a single family residence is said to be this big, then based on the sizes of everything else in the city, then we are going to allocate the split between who uses it and then the availability to cover that cost. It was nothing to do with property taxes or anything. It was just a method of try to come up with a fair and equitable method amongst all entities within the city.
Brian, I understand that, but you've been a part of this conversation also, and you know that the conversation you have an analysis here, and it's not, and I understand your analysis is not trying to compensate for the property tax issue. However, the conversation has been the fact that they're not paying property tax, and you'll admit that, correct?
They don't pay property taxes, but it doesn't delve into the logic of this calculation.
No, I understand that, but I understand that. Yeah. Okay.
Councilmember
There's another
Cleveland?
methodology we want, we could, if you're all are comfortable and you can support it to the citizens, is to do what Walla did and have one charge per account. That's what Walla decided. Maybe they experienced the same issues with trying to come up with the rate.
Brian, at this point,
this
point, I would just like to see what the residential occupancy at night is of the students, dorms and stuff, to make it comparable to what a single family, multifamily nursing home would be like. So anyway.
Yeah, I'll do what you guys want me to do.
Okay.
Councilmember Cleveland?
Kind of at the start of this presentation, Brian had talked about the need to come up with a rate structure because we're looking at a $500,000 deficit per year if we don't put something in. I'm kind of inclined to suggest, what was it, 13 a month per billable?
1340.
1340. I'm inclined to suggest that we move forward with that, with the expectation that we're going to continue to work on the rate structure, and we phase it in. Start at 1340 a month first year. We'd be doing 33% of that, and we continue the discussion of how do we make this fair. In the meantime, we need to be making up the money that we're paying out to support the service.
Well, fortunately, at this point in time, we haven't hired any of those additional staff because we're waiting to finalize this. So definitely fire EMS are, struggling for resources.
Right. So that's the pressure then, is that they need support sooner rather than later. I don't know if any other people have thoughts on this, but I'd like to see this happen sooner than later, but we keep running into the impasse of what's the fair rate structure. So I'm inclined to go with same as Walla. with the expectation that we're going to continue to talk about this and try to figure out, how are we fair to across the board to Walla and University? We don't want anyone to be fitting the majority of the bill or a significant portion of the bill that's out of proportion with how they're using it. We don't want to screw anyone.
Councilmember Jessup? Oh, sorry, Mr. Cleveland.
I don't know if anyone else is feeling like, all right, let's go with that, or like, no, let's just keep talking about it before we pass anything. But in the meantime, our staff are hurting.
Mr. Jessup?
Yeah, so two things, if I may. One, I've been here a month, so whatever the backstory of property and all that kind of good stuff, I'm simply trying to ask questions for clarifications. Could you remind me, Councilmember Cleveland, what is the 1340? I apologize, I don't remember that, and I don't have it in my notes. What is it that you're referring to?
Correct me if I'm wrong here, Brian, but that's the amount that we would charge if we just did a flat average across every account.
Yeah, we have 3,112 active accounts. You take the 500,000 and divide it by the number of active accounts, then that would be the charge per account, regardless of what size or use or anything. It's a shared cost amongst all entities. So you look at a place like the school would get a charge for $13.40 a month. Any of the schools, Walmart would get a charge for $13.40 a month. Single family residents would get charged $13.40 a month. That's the philosophy there, and that is the direction that Walla Walla was going when they were implementing their ambulance utility. We talked originally about fairness in the charge, and that's what brought up this demand availability, and then you need some method of determining how you allocate amongst big, box stores and commercial entities and nursing homes. And then there was concern expressed in the last meeting that we weren't charging the nursing homes enough. So don't forget, under an average scenario, average-based scenario, one of the nursing homes would pay $13.40 a month, but consume 31.3% of the demand charge. So we talk about fairness. What's fair? I don't know. I'm working for you guys, so you tell me what you need.
Councilmember Sherman?
So Brian, I'm sorry for all of these questions,
Oh,
but
it's
I'm
fine.
glad. I assume you like math like I do. So some of this I'm looking at, I'm like, well, at least you're having fun doing it. But is there not a way to weight this based on incident count? And would that just mean a different calculation each year? Or are these, like, if we're looking at the incident counts, and I don't know what your numbers are here, the thing that's in our little booklet, the 1,429 incidents, and if it's weighted, like, or, I mean, is that not a possible thing to do? And say, like, this group had this many, so this is how their rate is determined?
Yes, we did that. For example, in the nursing homes, if you took $500,000 and multiplied it by 0.313%, that's $156,000 a year amongst three nursing homes. I think that was attempted in the last presentation in 2018, and it had alarm from the nursing homes of their having to absorb $156,000 a year.
So maybe weighting is wrong. What about smoothing? To say, like,
Well, then, we're trying to come up with a consistent, repeatable
right.
Method, which is easily applicable. When we set up new customers, we know exactly the thought process and how we go about doing that, because it'll be identified in the documents about how we go about this, and that will be expected from the state, that we follow whatever our procedures are. So
then,
that was the whole problem in trying to come up with this demand availability and so forth.
So I guess my next question would be, like, of the samples that you have here on the Excel spreadsheet, if we were to look at a list of every single family residence, multifamily, commercial property and everything, is that going to show for us that everything is more equal, or is it still going to show, you know, all of these things, and we get down to the commercial units where every 600, 9,400, and then $32,000 for the university? Is that really the gap there that we see if we were looking at every single property? Does that question make sense? Like if we
Yeah,
didn't
the math works. We have the total number of units that we've calculated based on all the properties. Of course, we don't have to do it for single family residence because it's considered one, and that's the largest majority of the accounts. So those are easy. But yeah, if you take all those accounts and add them up, it's going to come up with those charges of $500,000.
No. Yeah, I'm not questioning that. I'm saying, like, if we were to look at more properties, would there be something closer to that same rate for the university? Or is it really just this anomaly because of
it's an anomaly because they have so much square footage.
Okay, that's what I just wanted to clarify.
And that's what Lauren is saying by, well, let's just look at the residents that are occupied.
Yeah,
and then what's going to happen is the total amount is going to go down. So let's say, for example, there was 200,000 square feet. So at just as an example, at 200,000 square feet, the rate's going to go up. So I have to recalculate the rates for everything because you're going to have to absorb that additional dollar amount amongst the all the other areas because it's going to allocate more dollars to each section. So so I can't even tell you what the rate is until I do the calculation. I don't want to throw a number out there that isn't based on how it's going to impact all the groups. So Lauren was stating that the single family residence is the largest component of the number of entities. That number is going to go up by a certain amount to absorb the differential.
So what are we missing? Like, is there some way that we're like, if we're offering up like these, like, well, let's look at it this way. We're clearly not professionals in this capacity. So like, is there some other way that you guys would, but I mean, I know that you guys have been working on this for years. We've been talking about this for as long as I've been on council, it feels. But like, is there just something that we're not thinking of, or have we've exhausted all of the options and this is kind of where we're at based on all?
Well, there's a couple other options that were out there, and it was based on the average number of individuals that live in a household and coming up with an equivalent unit based on, I think it's 3.5. We eliminated that method because we'd have to go through and figure out for commercial units how many employees they have in a particular office during the day to try to come up with the ERU based on that factor. And same with and you're going to find with the university has how many people on site on a given day. I'm sure it's going to skew the numbers the same direction.
Yeah, I'm more thinking if there's something.
No, I'm more than open to exploring different charge out options, and that's what this dialogue is about, is coming up with a fair and equitable method. Right. I'm not trying to put roadblocks up. Just give me some more things you'd want me to look at.
I want to make sure. I want to make sure that you don't feel like we're causing you a roadblock if you're like, well, I have this really good idea, but no one's asked for it.
No problem at all. We're just, it's been stressed in the past. We want a fair and equitable method. This was our attempt at a fair and equitable method.
Yeah, no, I appreciate everything that you've done, Brian. Thank you.
And I just want to quickly say, and then I'll call on the council members, is Lauren, my friend. It was not a way for, in my opinion, it was us talking about property taxes was not a way of getting them to pay taxes. What my consideration is that it would not add to an expense. So hopefully it wouldn't be an undue burden on them since, they already don't have this huge property tax bill. That was the mindset of what I was bringing it up about when I brought it up, is just that I just didn't see it being an undue burden because they're already saving thousands of dollars in property taxes. So we're not adding it on top of a huge expense. So that's where I was going. It wasn't a place to try to get them to pay property taxes. So I just wanted to clarify that. But that's Councilmember Williams.
Well, I wanted to bring up, I apologize for mentioning property taxes because it really didn't have anything to do with what I was talking about. But so I apologize for that. I do have a question and then a comment, but my question is, what I've not been able to tell is the university has a bunch of single family homes that they rent out to students. Then they also have a bunch of single family homes that they rent out not as part of their village housing thing. And are all of those lumped under the university?
Yes.
Because what I
at the county level, identified all properties that have buildings on them. I didn't differentiate between any of the different buildings. It's all the total square footage of everything that's owned according to county records, that the square footage that they have filed on record.
So I suspect what's happening is some of the ambulance calls that are recorded by the fire department as going to single family are going to university properties because they have no way of knowing who owns the property. And I don't know of any easy way to split out, because I think about the university has a lot of what looks like single family homes, except they're being used for something else. So I don't know of any simple way for you to split out the single family homes that people are living in that are owned by the university. So I have no idea how to make this fair. And I really do agree with Councilmember Cleveland's comment that at some point we need to pick something rather than just keep turning. So I have to admit at this point, I'm happy almost anything that results in yes, we are going to do this so we can hire people. I'll support at this point, because I don't know how you can make it fair without putting together such a paperwork burden that we'd have to add more to the tax to pay for the extra person to do the paperwork. But maybe I'm just.
All right, so I'm going to go to Mr. Rizzatello and then Councilmember Boyle and then Councilmember Peterson.
Okay, I was just crunching if we went to the flat rate, and then if we divvy it up by the percentages we previously discussed, that 33, the 66, and the 100%. Basically for this year, that would end up being like an aggregate rate per ERU of $4.30 at 33% at 66, then $8.61. If that's the route we want to go, just look at some comparable ambulance utilities like nearby. So for instance, like City of Richland, their residential rate is 10. So basically at 33 and 66%, you're still below that. So I just want to throw that out there as food for thought in the spectrum of this. So.
All right, thank you. Ms. Boyle?
So I agree with Cleveland that we need to kind of at least put something in motion as a stopgate for this, and so that we can start getting the support that we need. But have you guys, Brian, have you guys talked to the college about, if somebody gets a new property tax, okay, and I'm just using that as an example, and they think that it is out of line, there's an appeals process. Is there a way of us saying, we're going to calculate this way, let there be an appeals process, right? Notify the university and say, you have 60 days, 90 days, whatever it may be. And in that time, we've got this stopgate rate. So for this first year, it'd be $4 and change for everybody. And then with the understanding that those rates are being readjusted at the beginning of 2023, and give the university a heads up and say, hey, this is how this is being calculated. This is what you're going to owe. Give them 60 days to say, hey, this is actually the square footage of what's used, or something like that, and have that dialogue and having that appeal process. I feel like that's kind of that middle of the road where we're telling them this is the formulated calculation. If you don't think that this is reasonable because of, unused spaces, things like that, this is a process so that we can find a fair value. Because I think that there is something to be said for, they do own all of the square footage, but it's not all being used. It's not all the same as a residential home, and it's not getting the same need, right? So has there been any thought in having that?
No, not up to this point.
And I just
definitely from our perspective in administration is having one rate and then having to go back and redo everyone's rate again is burdensome for us, because we have to set up our system new to account for this rate. So it would be nice from our perspective to have it done once, but I understand your perspective.
I just, who knows? They may come back and say, yep, that looks right. But it at least opens that door where you've got some calculations in there. I just trying to find some gray area.
Right. I'm intrigued by Lauren's suggestion of maybe going back and looking at the utilized dorm square footage, et cetera, seeing what impact that has on the calculation.
Yep.
Councilman Peterson, yeah.
No, I agree. This has been a good discussion. We can agree to disagree, and I think that's the way a good family operates. But we don't know, Brian, until you go back in there, get input from the college. Let's say that the 692,000 square feet drops to 200,000. I don't know. Who knows, right? We don't know that the residential family doesn't go to $6.99, right? Or we don't know that the 804 doesn't go to we don't know. We may be surprised by how much it goes up, or we may find out that every calculation above there goes up by 30 cents, and I think that's something that maybe we could reach a middle ground or a common ground on. When you're spreading that over the larger numbers, I think back the envelope last time we talked about it, I think it was I came up with 35 cents more per single family, multifamily, and so I would just encourage us to look at that and just, we kind of like it, or nope, we don't. Let's just go with what we've got. I just want to see what that quick calculation looks like.
Yeah, I can do that.
Councilmember Cleveland.
Have we heard from one of the representatives from the university, their opinion on what they would consider as an undue burden, or what their thoughts are on, the proposed, rate that would affect them? If not, could we maybe invite someone to one of our workshops or council meeting? They're a big organization, they have some large expenses, would this be particularly overwhelming to them? Like, gosh, this could break us, or this would be like, well, as much as we want to keep that money, like, this isn't what we'd consider particularly unreasonable.
Yeah, I could add, we could always extend the invite. I will say they are aware of this dialogue that we are having, because we do have quarterly coordination meetings with them. And about a month ago, and then even the prior quarter of that, I did tell them that we were in a pickle with this whole ambulance thing, and we needed to figure this out. And pretty much what I told them is just as we're coming up with these various ways of calculations and everything else, it was on board docs, through the YouTube channel, through the ambulance utility webpage itself. And that was where to get the most appropriate current content at. So, I mean, there's a general awareness there that the process is underway.
Okay, so I'd like to be able to give Brian one last direction of what we want to look at. It's kind of sounding that it's coming down to taking a look at occupancy or everybody paying the equal price, no matter what their size of the unit or amount of people. I'd like to know if the council's okay with those two added on for discussion. Yes, yes, okay.
Okay.
All right. We made it through. And we still like each other.
Oh, we love each other.
Absolutely. That's why I wanted to make sure you knew I wasn't bothered by your statement.
Yeah.
I understood it. Okay, so that's all of our agenda items. Is there any other business for good of the order?
One quick thing, Mike, I was driving into College Place on Whitman, and I should text you this. I'm sorry. Instead, the wayfaring sign that's across from the Roger School soccer field.
Yeah.
Somebody had pulled it out of the ground and was marching around with it and then put it back in the ground. And I think it's going to be in somebody's basement, you know, next to the big screen TV here, I think pretty soon. But anyway, maybe somebody can look at that and put it back in the ground.
Yeah, we need to re-anchor that.
Okay, it was kind of the good thing is they put it back in the ground. They didn't take it home when I was watching them. So
I'll admit that in high school, some friends and I walked away with a stop sign that was not in the ground. So
okay.
For his basement.
We do need
And didn't take it home because you were watching.
Yeah, we definitely should think of that. I will say my fraternity at University of Illinois would do stuff like that. So
See,
yeah.
I was 15 and doing it.
Next to the pool table, right?
Yeah.
They're all in public record.
Well,
Plausible deniability.
No, that's anybody else? All right. Is there a motion to adjourn then?
So moved. Councilmember Cleveland.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
All right. So if there is no objection, we are adjourning at 7:22 p.m. Have a good night.